With help from Sen and Kimigiku, we were able to flee from my father and Takeda. As we ran down the mountainous road, we'd arrived at the village. As soon as I took in the sights, however, an unmistakable rush of nostalgia came over me.
ここが私たちの一族が隠れ住んでいるヤセの里よ。
Oh. It had been my first time ever stepping foot here, but I couldn't shake the strangest feeling of déjà vu, like I'd been in this exact spot a long time ago. When I had first learned that I came from a demon family, I had my doubts, but the weird sensation of familiarity seemed to confirm my lineage to me in my heart at long last.
本来人間をここに立ち入らせることはないんだけど、彼の怪我を考えるとやむを得ないわね。
心遣いに感謝します、おせんさん。
気にしないで。彼女の大切な人なら私にとっても大切な人だもの。少なくともここなら薩長軍が攻めてくることはないわ。ちょっと待っててね。部屋の支度をさせるから彼を休ませてあげましょう。
Thank you, Sen. Sen led us to an old, quaint wooden building in the back of the Yase village. Since we'd walked in, a feeling of serene grace warmed me with every step. With any hope, the positive aura of this village would do well to improve Iba. Or at least, this is what I hoped as I worked to replace his blood-soaked bandages. Just then...
そろそろ交代しましょう。昨夜から寝てらっしゃらない様子ですし。
I'm fine. I'm not sleepy at all.
伝えたいことがあるの。あなたの気持ちはわかるけど、ほんの四半時でいいわ。一緒に来てちょうだい。
The curtness of her request and demeanor read to me like Sen had something urgent to share. It was hard to leave Iba in his current state, even for a second, but... Okay, I'll be right there. Sen and Kimigiku saved our lives. It would have been unbecoming of me to do them any disrespect, so I did whatever she asked of me.
多分あなたにはもう察しがついてると思うけど、里の医師の見立てだと血を失いすぎてるそうよ。
Takada's sword hadn't just left a flesh wound. Bones, arteries, and muscles were completely severed. If it were a simple matter of stitching up a deep gash, it would have been easier, but even with Western medicine, there was nothing we could do to stop the bleeding. Then that means...
今のままだと彼はこの先一生刀を持つことはできないでしょうね。
Sen sighed, rubbing her forehead delicately as she shared the news. Then a rustle came from somewhere in the building. And then...
中へ戻ってください。お二人の話をあなたに聞かせるわけには。
As I rushed to turn around, there stood...
今の話は本当ですか？
Iba looked at Sen, his face pale and sweaty. For a second, Sen seemed like she was about to answer, but she realized quickly that anything she said would only hurt him, so she nodded quietly, knowing how much pain it would cause him.
ええ、その通りよ。
Hearing Sen's words, Iba's eyelids flickered. Then Iba shut his eyes tightly and crumpled down to his knees. Oh no. Iba, are you going to be okay? I rushed beside him, supporting his body as he looked close to collapsing.
話の続きは中でしましょう。彼がこの先を聞きたいと思ってくれるかはわからないけど。
Kimigiku and I helped Iba stand, and we returned inside.
すみません。僕としたことがお見苦しいところをお見せしました。
Iba's voice seemed to be a lot calmer compared to his initial reaction. His disappointment and shock were no small things to overcome. The manner in which his composure returned was impressive.
続きは明日にした方がいいかしら。聞きたくないって言うんなら無理に話そうとは思わないけど。
Iba looked Sen straight in the eye and responded.
僕は武士ですから、刀を振るって力の限り戦って、たとえ命を落とすことになろうとも後悔はしません。この左腕を失ったのも己の剣技の未熟さゆえ、そのことはよく分かっているつもりです。
His positive, earnest words brought some warmth to my worried heart. How was he able to hold his head high or keep himself from giving up? Like always, Iba was speaking from his heart with sincerity. I could see a lot of the Shinsengumi in him.
三男さんの判断を否定するつもりじゃありませんけど、僕は刀を握れなくなったからといって武士でなくなったとは思いません。左腕が使えなくなったとしてもまだ右腕があります。右腕がなくなっても足や口がある。僕はまだ戦えます。
Jesus. His spirit was unwavering, and the unrelentless politeness in his voice spoke volumes about him.
幕軍は今回の戦には負けましたけど、このまま薩長が天下を取るということにはならないでしょう。まだ戦う機会はある。だから僕は戦い続けなくてはならないんです。
Neither Sen, Kimikiko, and I could bring ourselves to interrupt him, listening to him speak. Honestly, what could any of us say?
ですが、あれは武田さんの腕は何だったのでしょうか。羅刹になった者はすぐに傷が癒えてしまうという話は僕も聞いていますが、ほぼ切断した腕も元通りになるのですか。それとも腕が生えたとでも。おせんさん、教えてください。
Sen gave a small sigh.
分かったわ。少し長い話になりそうだけど。
Just as she was about to oblige him, she turned like she'd heard something and looked at Kimigiku.
おきく、外の様子を見てきてくれる？
承知しました。
Kimigiku bowed briefly and she went outside. I wonder what it was. Had someone been eavesdropping? Without a beat, Sen turned back to Iba and continuing on.
伊庭さん、あなたが先ほど抱いた疑問はもっともだわ。あれはただの羅刹というわけではない。彼の異常な強さの源はあの右腕、鬼の腕よ。
鬼の腕？
あの武田という男は羅刹の力だけではなく鬼の力をも手に入れた。
There was regret in Sen's voice. So what's the deal with this demon's arm? And how in the world were my father or Takara able to obtain such a thing?
古い時代の鬼たちは今の私たちより強大な力を持っていたと言われているの。だけどある時、人間との争いの結果、とある一族の棟梁が両腕を失うことになった。もしあの腕が人の手に渡ったら 災いが起きると言われていた。だから私たちの祖先はその腕をこのヤセの里で厳重に保管していたのよ。
Hearing about our ancestors in those demon clans, having it said aloud was a bizarre reality. However, the seriousness with which Sen spoke told me that this was no fairy tale or myth. After pausing for a moment to breathe, she turned to face me after grabbing my hand gently.
あなたには伝えてなかったけど、コ堂さんの行方は私たちの方でも探していたの。コ堂さんは西国で羅刹の実験を重ねた結果、生み出した新しい羅刹をとある藩に売り込んだらしいわ。そして先日、彼はこのヤセの里に入り込み、私たちの一族が厳重に保管していた鬼の腕を盗み出したのよ。私とお菊はその腕を取り戻すためにコ堂さんを追ってたんだけど。
My hand began to shake as it rested in hers. Why had father done such a thing? The thought of him behaving so selfishly was shocking, even though I saw his deranged face. The fact alone that my father had been continuing his fear experiments meant lives were being lost. It pained me, and I welled with frustration, sadness, and an unshakable guilt. I couldn't look up.
大丈夫ですか？もし聞くのが辛いのなら僕だけで聞きましょうか。
I shook my head. If Iba, after losing his arm and being wounded, could be this strong, there was no way I could let my feelings get the better of me. No, I'm fine. Please continue. Sen nodded and she continued.
武田の右腕はこのヤセの里から盗み出された鬼の腕に間違いないわ。本来なら切断した腕、しかも鬼の腕が人の体とつながるはずはないけど、落ち水を飲み羅刹になったことで生命力が増大したせいでしょうね。
Sen bit her lip tightly.
鬼の腕を盗み出すためコ堂さんはこの里の鬼たちを何人も殺していったわ。いくらあなたの父を名乗っていようとも、ヤセの里の長として彼を許すことはできない。
Sen wasn't in the wrong for thinking this. Not only had my father time and time again caused problems for the Shinsengumi, but now he was committing crimes against his fellow people. My eyes were damp from the angry tears I was trying my best to restrain, but Iba, who up until this point had listened quietly, muttered aloud.
石腕でも戦うつもりでした。人間相手の戦ならば刀を銃に持ち帰れば戦えると。ですがあの武田さんにはどうあがいても勝てません。力が欲しい。鬼の腕を持った武田さんと戦えるだけの力が。
Iba shut his eyes out of frustration. Then he glanced over at me.
君は落ち水をここへ持ってきているのでしたね。
My eyes grew wide. His mention of this could have only meant one thing at this point. But before I could stop him, Iba continued.
僕にあの薬をください。そうすれば少なくともあの時のような無様な負け方はしません。
I understood where Iba was coming from, but I can't do that. There was no way I could agree to this. I'd watched both Sanan-san and Hesuke suffer closely, but Iba wouldn't back down.
お願いします。あなたは彼らをあのままにしておいていいと思っているんですか？
I wasn't saying that, but
だったら
Iba spoke up in frustration.
酷なことを言うようだけど、たとえ落ち水を飲んだとしてもその腕は元には戻らないわ。切断しかけているものを治癒するほどの力は羅刹にもないはずだもの。
Iba looked pained, and he hung his head low. However, Sen continued with a fierce determination, shining from her eyes.
だけど武田の腕がこの里から盗まれた鬼の腕ならば。
Before she finished, Sen pulled something out from before the two of us. My eyes grew wide and I gulped. If what Takeda had was the right arm, then what Sen was showing us was the left arm.
彼らができたのならば、あなたにもできるかもしれない。
Iba stared intently at the demon's arm. Sen! Considering her own responsibilities, it had only been natural that she would suggest this, but I still couldn't get myself to agree with it. To not only turn Iba into a fury, but to top it off, infuse into him the power of demons.
ごめんなさい。私もこんな方法は取りたくないけど、武田を倒して光道さんの野望をくじくにはこれが最善の方法だと思うの。恨んでくれて構わないわ。それに決断するのはあくまでも伊庭さん本人よ。
There was no way I could be angry at Sen. In fact, the reason why Sen was in this position at all to begin with was because of what my own father had done. Sen looked back at Iba once more.
私は羅刹を認めていないわ。本来ならこんな策を取ろうとは思わない。以前あなたに彼女を守る覚悟があるかどうかを聞いたこと覚えてるわよね。もう一度聞くわ。この腕は彼女を守る強大な力と大きな呪いをもたらす。そしてこの腕を取る決断をしたが最後、あなたは人の世界の歴史に関わってはいけない存在となる。
Iba's eyes fluttered. He would be giving up his humanity. That meant he could no longer fight alongside the Shinsengumi, which for him was nearly unthinkable considering his longtime friends were a crucial part of himself. Even then,
それでも覚悟があるのなら、あなたに人としての性を捨ててもいい覚悟があるのなら、この力を持っていきなさい。判断はあなたに任せます。
For a while, Iba stared back at the demon's arm, eventually closing his eyes and muttering to himself.
先ほどは片腕だけでも足だけになっても戦えると言いましたが、力がなくては大切な人を守りきることなどできません。彼らのような者が薩長軍に関わるのであれば、どのみち幕軍が滅ぼされるのは必定でしょう。ならば迷うべきではない。
After Iba said this, he turned to face me once again.
僕に落ち水をください。たとえ人ではなくなったとしても、大切な人を守れない方が辛いんです。
What could I say? Okay. So this is the only way, huh? It must have been an obvious question to Iba, but it still felt so wrong to me. Iba silently nodded. His clear eyes showed glowing resolutely. Seeing his expression in this moment reminded me of the moment that Sanan-san had decided to drink the water of life. Sanan-san had mentioned that losing one's arms was essentially death to any swordsman. I suppose Iba had felt the same, both of them deeply committed to their duties as warriors. To feel cornered, suffocating under the possibility of having no other real solution, and choosing this. And I thought to myself that because I understood where Iba had been coming from, I couldn't bring myself to stop him. Honestly, I want nothing less than for you to become a fury. My throat squeezed shut as the words left my mouth, but Iba smiled despite my instance.
人じゃなくなってもいいんです。
Huh?
僕は武士として最後まで戦い抜くためにこの道を選ぶ。それが一番の理由ですけど。でももう一つ理由があるんです。何だと思います？
I considered what it could be for a second, but no idea came to mind. Iba blushed tenderly, and his cheeks were rosy as he offered his answer.
人ではないと言われたあの時の君の気持ちに近づけるのであれば、人でなくなるのも悪くはないかもしれません。
Oh. That's right. He was talking about the time Takeda had called me a beast. No, that can't have been it. If I look back far enough, I could recall a moment in our distant past. But where? Ah, that's right. It was during our childhood, as many other children were gathered to play around the clinic. But children stopped coming to visit after a certain incident. At the time, some of the other children had acquired a ladder, climbing up to reach the clinic's roof. Holy sh! How did they get a ladder? You guys! Don't climb up there! You'll get hurt! However, no one else listened to me.
大丈夫だよ、これぐらい。大した高さじゃないって。
Someone had been pretending to be a firefighter and climbed up the ladder before it tipped over. Oh no! Watch out! I lost sight of myself and I ran to the ladder. Then... The ladder toppled over, and I had fallen with it. My arm received a deep cut from a stone beside me.
大丈夫か？うわ、血が出てる。
This is fine. This isn't too serious. It'll heal up.
After saying this, after counting internally to 10, it healed immediately. The neighborhood children widened their eyes in surprise, entranced by my healing powers. Then...
どうなってるんだ？あんなに血が出てたのに。
My wounds heal quite quickly. I didn't notice it until recently, and I didn't know it wasn't too common.
The children didn't wait for me to finish.
お化けだ！傷が治るお化けだ！
Before I could call them back, all of the children scattered from the yard. And the next day, other children had come to visit and see me at my home. For me, it was normal for my injuries to heal quickly. I didn't know any differently. Never in my wildest imagination did I expect people to show surprise, let alone hatred, towards me because of something like that. And it didn't end there.
イエーイバケモノさっさと江戸から出ていけ
The children began flinging rocks at the clinic, and I could see the passerby whispering rumors about me as they walked by our clinic. What kind of child would have the foresight to know that their body was any different? Even so, every child I had grown up or played with learned to treat me with seething contempt. People hated what they didn't know. They didn't know me, and it crushed me inside to believe it. Just then,
誰ですか今石を投げたのは。怪我をしたらどうするんですか
Iba, who I'd called Hachiro back then, was studying my father's books, came running out of my father's clinic.
Wait, Hachiro, it's okay.
いいって何がです
I couldn't bring myself to speak. I stayed silent. If I had told Hachiro what I was, even he might begin to hate me.
黙っていては分かりませんよ。ちゃんと教えてください。
He quietly urged me to speak up. So I timidly told him.
It's my fault they're making fun of me. I can't stop it.
Hachiro seemed to have a word stuck on the tip of his tongue, waiting to respond, but then...
普通と違うのはそんなに悪いことですか
Well,
もし僕が普通の子供と違ったらあなたは僕を嫌いになりますか
I shook my head. Hachiro had always been so kind to me. I loved him. Even if we were different, nothing could change how I felt about him.
でしょ僕も同じですよあなたは化け物なんかじゃありません普通の女の子です
His words seemed to heal the wounds that were hurting my heart.
でもその体のことは他の人には秘密にしておいた方がいいかもしれませんねまた今回みたいに嫌な思いをしないとは限らないし
hi.
そんな顔をしないでください別に叱ってるわけじゃないんです
Hachiro had been able to settle a lot of the uneasiness in my heart, but the pain of losing all of my friends to this lie that I was some monster was a little hard to assuage? Something?
困ったな元気を出してくださいあとそうだもしあなたに意地悪をする子がいたら僕がやっつけてあげますよ
Oh man, small Hachiro. It's like, if people make fun of you, I'm gonna beat them up, you know? Oh.
Beat them up? You?
His figure was slender like a little girl's, and the thought of him becoming a warrior was so strange to me that I couldn't help but question him.
大丈夫ですよ今までは真面目にしてなかったけどこれからはちゃんと剣術の稽古をします大切な友達を守るためですからね
The brightness of his wide smile felt even more warm than usual. And just like that, I felt many of my worries slip away from under me. Hold on, I need to write something down now. Ah, I know what is missing.